Welcome to the Aristocrats Soccer Podcast, the elite soccer podcast, and all of soccer podcasting and podcasting in general. I'm your co-host, David Harris, and I'm joined by my elite co-host, Jake Keegan. Jake, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dave. We are very excited to do this episode on one of your special friends and one of your really good friends, someone that I've interacted with as well. And also we have a great guest and Michael Lewis to discuss it with us.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Michael, welcome and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Well, first of all, thank you. It's great to be on, and thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, if we're going to have a podcast called Aristocrats Soccer Podcast, there's nobody more appropriate in terms of elite soccer folks within the U.S. or beyond than Michael Lewis. So we're very appreciative that you came on to join us tonight.
Well, it's not like I have to go to a game today or anything like that. So I'll tell you this, if there's one good thing about the pandemic, and please, there's plenty of bad things about it, but it's cut down on my traveling to and from games. I watch a lot on TV these days.
Yeah, it's one thing, Jake, that Michael and I would talk about quite a bit. And if I ever was covering a game, of course, Michael was there. And so at Yankee Stadium for NYCFC or for Red Bull Stadium, Red Bull Arena, you'd see Michael there driving from Long Island to cover all these games throughout the tri-state area. It was much easier when the Cosmos are playing in Hofstra, for both of us.
Yeah, I can only imagine. You guys have both been so good in spreading kind of soccer in the local community. Michael, a little bit more than you, Dave. No offense.
Yeah, just a little.
Everyone does their part. Everyone does their part in their own unique way. It's funny you talk about going to Red Bull Arena. It used to be easier to go to New Jersey years ago. I was thinking of that. To Giant Stadium and the Meadowlands to watch the Metro Stars. And yes, it was 15 minutes closer, but there was less traffic way back then. And it's a big difference today. I think more construction and more traffic. And I don't know if it's ever going to get better. That's the one thing I do miss is getting there in a little more than an hour. Sometimes it takes 2 hours to get there.
Yeah.
One question I had for you before we kind of get into Gus and get into the main topic of the episode was just, you've covered the game for years and years and years. Do you have kind of a greatest memory or an event that you were at? I know this is kind of putting you on the spot there, and it's early in we didn't even warm up yet. So
Michael's always ready to go.
Well, there are so many of them. I put together a list and I said, I'll do a top 10. And I go, I'll make it a top dozen, Sweet 16. I'll go to 20, 25. And it ranks from youth soccer all the way up to the international game. And I'm not going to bore you with every one of them. You'll have to read one of my columns to get bored when I finally write that. I did write, by the way, a column about my 25 memorable games at the Mitchell Athletic Complex. So that's how many I had there. So many memorable ones from LISFL championship games, Canjero Cup, the Rough Riders, Cosmos, college soccer, high school soccer combination. Now, I'm not trying to evade your question or anything like that. I think one goes back all the way. One that comes to mind very quickly. Actually, it was 2 games in the old North American Soccer League. This will belie my age. Back in 1977, Rochester Lancers, first team professional team I ever covered. The Lancers played the Toronto Metros Croatia, and remember that name, Croatia,
right?
Because the Lancers had several Serbian players on the team. And it was the playoffs, 1977 playoffs, quarterfinals more or less, and they played 2 incredible games. The first game was a home-and-home series. First game was at Holler Stadium, scoreless draw. Lancers' top striker, Mike Stojanovic, misses 2 penalty kicks in the game against the Croatians. Remember, I told you not to forget that, the end of their name. And and a player gets 2 yellow cards for the Lancers, but is not asked to leave the field. Eventually, Coach Popovich, who went on to direct the New York Arrows, let's make it a Long Island connection there. He finds out what has happened, so he takes the player out and replaces him. And eventually, Lancers win in a shootout. They win 1-0. Lots of other crazy stuff happening in that match. The second game, which I didn't, and by the way, my lead, which at the time I didn't think was going to hold up, the lead in the Democrat and Chronicle in Rochester was a soccer game to end all soccer games because there was just so much happening. And at the time, I'm thinking, boy, is that hyperbole? And as it turns out, 4 decades later, it still works out. The second game, though, Lancers get not one, but 2 players ejected in the first half in Toronto, which is like enemy territory. Fans hate the Lancers. Even if they're not Serbian, they hate the Lancers because they represent Serbia. Lancers managed to win 1-0 on a late goal. 2 of the craziest games I've ever covered. And like I said, they're up there. And saying that there are many others, but I'm not going to bore you with the others. So that'll be enough for today. I don't see any of you 2 guys falling asleep yet. So I guess
No.
We just took our afternoon nap. We're good to go. Whatever you got for us, go for it.
So the topic of the day for us to talk a little bit about is good friend is Gus Xikis. So Gus, for anybody out there listening, kind of is, well, actually he is the sort of connection bringing the 3 of us together. Gus, for those listening and don't know who he is, you can Google, you can read one of Michael's columns. Michael wrote about him when he passed away last year in April. Unfortunately, it was due to brain aneurysm. As far as we know, there wasn't anything to do with COVID. Caused that brain aneurysm. But Gus was so influential in the local soccer community here in New York. Just a very, very powerful figure that it seemed like most everybody either knew or knew of. And just Gus and I got to be really close, but I thought we'd bring Michael on to talk a little bit about him and share some of the stories. But the connection there, that brings us together, would be with Jake and I, was that when I first got to know Gus back in late 2012, early 2013, Gus brought me up. Gus was still about Westchester Flames, and Jake had just finished his run there. But that's sort of how we got started off, was that mutual connection there, was through the Flames and through Gus. But with that being said, with Michael, if feel free to just, free form whatever, stories or whatever comes to mind when you think of Gus, just maybe a couple stories about him that sort of gives a sample for everybody listening about what Gus meant to soccer, here in New York and ultimately in the US as well.
Well, I believe I knew Gus for like 30 years and at different levels. And, I know he's associated with the Long Island Soccer Football League, and rightfully so as president and a hard worker for them. But like you said, he was with the Westchester Flames, which was in the old PDL, the Premier Development League. He was associated with the New York Magic, a women's team for a couple of years as well, too. Did a lot of things, I think, behind the scenes that we might not even know about, probably with either the Cosmos, Red Bulls, NYCFC, maybe just giving them their support. And obviously, his sons played college soccer. I think he was a youth coach as well, too. So you talk about every level he made an impact in. I'll speed up maybe to the 21st century. I think the one thing that impressed me about Gus was that, yes, he was the leader of the league, but he also did a lot of the hard work, heavy lifting as well, too. He wasn't afraid of doing that, whether it needed to be done to set an example. The other thing about Gus is that, and I've never been a great joke teller, and I will let other people tell jokes. And when I've been around him, I had always been entertained by his ability to tell a joke. And I've tried to learn from him. And I think that has helped maybe break tension with some people, not necessarily me. We got along very, very well. Saying that, as funny as he could be, as he had been, he could, as the president of the league, he could, the hammer came down pretty hard on teams too. If the team used illegal players, and I know he had some great research assistants out there too, knowing who was with who and who shouldn't have been with who. He'd, he would either give them a warning or more likely, hey, you're out of the tournament. You cannot progress anymore because you're using a player that's not on your roster, a legal player, whatever the reason. So there were two sides of him. There was that humanistic side, I think, down to earth, salt of the earth guy, who was, his family was everything, his business was everything, and also the league too, the sanctity of the league, making sure it ran correctly. If I could intercede perhaps with a personal thing that's close to my heart.
Yeah.
And Gus put together, the journal for the LISFL Hall of Fame, and which was once every 5 years. That sounds like he's on vacation there, but it's still a lot of hard work getting all the inductees and all their background and information. But he also he did it yearly for the Eastern New York State Soccer Association, the adult association.
Right.
And, Gus is not a journalist. Let's put it this way. He didn't set out to be a journalist. And what has stunned me was that how professionally he put it together, how much detailed it was about all the inductees. And it was close to my heart because that is so important, I think, for soccer to understand who went before us, what they accomplished. Here it is. And as a journalist, I love that because I've used it for background for various people I've written about. And as a sad note, when I had to write several stories about Gus last spring, and I needed more information about him, I used the journal, his biography from the journal, to help fill out the obituary about Gus. That was a sad thing to do for so many reasons, but I think he captured my heart from the journalistic standpoint because he did something that was close to my heart as a historian. So I always appreciated that. That's my short answer on Gus.
One of the like 19 titles he had for the league was as like the league historian, for the so the LASFL, for everybody, listening who's not familiar already, it's your local amateur soccer league for Long Island, just like, it's typically the men's, they call it the men's league, but there had been a women's division in the league, but like many of the amateur leagues, the women's kind of division kind of ended up, women's group organization ended up doing their own sort of thing, and they have actually a very healthy and flourishing women's soccer league, here in Long Island and many other parts of the country as well. But that's what Gus did. He ran the league, and among many other things, where he was also, as you mentioned, Michael, involved with the state association. He was a delegate to USSF because of his involvement in the state association and being head of the league. And then also Gus, with the national body, the USASA, Gus was the Region 1 Cup commissioner and very heavily involved with Region 1 administration. And there's only 4 regions for the US, so it covers a lot of ground, Region 1. So just a few of the titles beyond what you mentioned with the Flames, the Magic, and so forth.
Thank you for filling all the details in for me. I appreciate that. So people will even understand Gus's impact. And, I know he left us way too early. And what we had, the drive-by, um, I don't know what you call it, wake, funeral. I thought that was an excellent idea. It was very well organized. It was, you know, difficult for so many of us for so many different reasons, but I'm glad that was organized to give him the the proper memorial and honor that he deserved. Although I was hoping we wouldn't have had to do it for 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. One Gus story that I have, just to interrupt real quick, was it was
Yeah.
at LISFL. It was at the Hall of Fame that Dave, you
Yeah.
so graciously invited me to. I had nothing really to do. I didn't even play on Long Island, but it was in 2018. It was when, Michael, you were inducted, which you didn't even mention, but you were too modest to mention. But you were inducted into the Hall of Fame that night, so I was there to witness it. And what I remember about that night, specifically about Gus, was there's some, for those who don't, it's like a gala. It's a massive banquet, like hundreds and hundreds of people. It's not like a small event. And Gus is in charge of organizing all of it. And I hadn't spoken to Gus since probably 2012. So at that point, it was like 6 years. And he was running around doing all these different things that night. And he still took the time. We had like a 5 or 10 minute conversation, just catching up and doing all like the thing. And he was like running around like a chick with his head cut off, trying to talk to everyone, trying to organize everything. There were way bigger people there that night than me, especially in the Long Island community. And he still took the time to kind of see what I was up to. And I mean, it's something that definitely sticks with me, just because like I knew him a bit playing with when I was playing with the Flames, but he wasn't like there every day. I didn't see him all the time, and he still kind of went out of his way to see me. So that was a pretty special moment for me.
Well, he had seen you play with Edmonton a couple times, which, unfortunately, like you don't have a lot of time when you're there playing with Edmonton, but like I had broadcasts, to a couple of Cosmo games, here once at Hofstra and once also at Coney Island.
Coney Island, yeah.
Yeah, when you were playing with Edmonton. So, like he did get to see you play professionally live, which he was, excited about. And apparently he had your jersey from the Flames, which he said he was going to give you. But I don't know what ever ended up happening to. I think it got buried somewhere. He had a lot.
No, he gave me. I had one jersey that he gave me a while back, and then also he gave me. They had this really nice like 3/4 zip or quarter zip that only the staff got, and it was like after a game one night. It was in the band. He was selling merchandise, and he was like, "Here, just take this. Don't tell anyone." I still have it. It's probably the nicest. Like at Westchester Frames, they just gave us like regular T-shirts for training. They didn't really give us any gear, but it was actually a nice quarter zip.
Oh no, they took all the gear.
Yeah. Just offload it.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Mike.
It just reminded me about, two quick things. Yes, that any Hall of Fame extravaganza is a big deal. It felt like a mini wedding, really. You had so many people there, so much food, so much pomp and circumstance, but in a very good way. It wasn't over the top by any means. And it was special. It's going to be, when you're inducted into a Hall of Fame, it's special no matter what. But a lot of the inductees I already knew or worked with, Alfonso Mandello, Hank Steinbrecher, Shep Messing, and I think they had me go first in my induction speech. And I thank them for not having me follow Hank Steinbrecher, who will always bring the house down, no doubt about that. But it was a memorable night. It was a fantastic night. My mother was able to attend. My wife was there with me, and something that will live for me forever. One more thing about Gus, which I really appreciate, that I think he was also a good listener, because when you're the boss, the president of a league, company, organization, you want to hear about different opinions. And he always wanted to engage in talks with me, whether it was about soccer, maybe it was stuff off the record as well too. And yes, I always made sure when things were on the record or off the record, and they were usually more off the record, because I think you could learn more about people, not necessarily writing about them, but just listening to them. And I think that was another strength that Gus had. And I always appreciated that. And maybe he appreciated the fact that I was trying to write everything down that he was telling me. That's one thing people maybe have a misconception about journalists. We're people too, I mean, not everything is on the record. Most of it is off the record.
Yeah. What were some of your memories, Michael, about one of the things Gus is most famous for are the post-game meals. So can you tell us a little bit about some of those that you were able to join us for?
Oh, well, probably in my younger days, before I lost a little weight, I probably had bigger meals, probably heartier meals, maybe if not a steak, something like that. As I maybe grew more conscious of my health, I decided to have maybe breakfast, maybe have eggs, and that's about it. Um, but it depends. If there was something in the afternoon, um, and to me, anything goes. Late at night, forget about it. One thing I loved, though, was going to Borelli's, an Italian restaurant in East Meadow, because I grew up in Westbury. So Westbury isn't that far from East Meadow. And my family went there a lot when I was a kid and had some great memories there, either having pizza or veal cutlet parmesan. So um, every time there was a game at Mitchell Athletic Complex, I was hoping he would say Borelli's, because I knew what I was probably going to have is either pizza or veal or some sort of parmesan. But saying that, I mean, no matter where we went, the league and Gus were very gracious on picking up the tab for everyone. So I wasn't going to complain, but if they asked for a vote, I would give my vote, but I would go along with the crowd as well too.
Yeah, I don't know if you got to experience that or not, Jake, but it kind of ties into what you guys are talking about with the food at the Hall of Fame gala. Like that was a huge Gus thing, where it was just like, but going for a meal after a game was like a Gus tradition. Like he always knew good spots. Like especially when we were in Queens, like he always seemed to know like the absolute best Greek places. But even the other, not doesn't have to be Greek. Just wherever you went for, a game, you'd always end up going out to eat with Gus after the game, and it just was something that it was a big thing, and oftentimes it was Gus like reaching into his pocket, to pick up the tab, like he kind of like he tried not to take, it wasn't that he really took money from the league to like pay for meals and stuff, because he tried to respect the idea that the teams are paying their money and all that, but like if we were there working for the league, like for the indoor tournament, like what Michael's talking about, and then we go to Borelli's afterwards, if everybody's there volunteering, and we had been there for pretty much 6-7 days, Gus's case 7 days straight, you go there after work at night, you're there till like 11, 12 o'clock at night, you're there all day Saturday, you're there all day Sunday, in Gus's mind it was like the least that the league could do, and we were getting the money, and guys are paying to go in admission $5, and so just to make everything everything always, he was always very good about things like that, but he would like to try to take guys out, or for volunteer our weekends for the league championships or the cup finals or whatever in June. I think you might have covered some of those, Michael, or maybe a U23. I know you were at some of the U23s and the Conjero Cups, and maybe you could touch on some of those games. I know especially we were able to get you more recently. In some of the recent years, some of the memories that maybe you could come to you when you think of it now.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I still have all of my old soccer weeks way back in the day. That was a weekly publication, 40 times a year. And this is before the internet. And I covered a number of several indoor tournaments there. I also covered some Long Island Cups, and those must have been horrible weekends because I think I covered the youth championships on a Saturday and the Long Island Cups on a Sunday. So you talk about back-to-back times, but um, some great times just meeting. Back then, I was just literally meeting people probably for the first time. More recently, it's been more Canjero and under 23 competitions. As a journalist, I look for the best story. That's what I root for more than anything else. I don't root for a particular team unless there's a great story behind that team or a player on it. And I remember, I think, was it the Canjero Cup when Port Jefferson won
Right.
on penalty kicks? It was what, 2018, 2019?
Yeah.
And I wound up basing it on the goalkeeper,
Yeah.
who was a policeman. His name doesn't ring a bell at the moment, but I've got it on Front Row Soccer, and it's on the Long Island Soccer Football League website as well too. But it turned out to be a great story on what he looks for in penalty kicks and what he does. I think, being in the law enforcement realm, and again, that's a favorite story of mine.
Yeah.
Because it's about prowess, what happened on the field, but it's also human interest as well too. And those are the stories I enjoy doing. And when you're writing about amateur soccer, I'm convinced that everyone has a story to tell. And it's up to me as a journalist to find out what that story is. Obviously, it's a lot easier when someone scores 2 goals in a game or whatever. You could write about that player, but what do they do for a living? Why do they love soccer? How does their significant other put up with them playing soccer all the time? Because even though you play once a week, you're probably training at least once a week, and you're watching games and doing all that. But I know David has helped me out a lot at some of these games too, introducing me to people, coaches before the matches, so they know that I'm going to talk to them afterwards, which is much appreciated. The quote unquote downside to covering local games is you don't have a program for background. Yes, there's a website. There are team websites. You could get some basic information, but it's, I think, important to find out about these teams beforehand as well too. And what I'm getting at is, for all the soccer I've covered, and like I said, I've covered World Cups, Olympic Games, professional soccer. In the long run, I don't care what it is, as long as it's a fun story to tell. And usually, and probably in my older age, the better stories I'm getting now are the ones that aren't the national team, because you have to share everything with everyone. Here, after a game, it's a lot of fun going one-on-one with a player and finding out about them and having a series of questions and putting things together, and you get a better story out of it. As a journalist, that's what I'm looking for. I'd like to think other writers would go that route as well too. It's some go, oh, I have to cover this high school game. Some of my best stories in recent years have been about high school sports. Why? Because they're playing for the fun of it, just like players play in the LISFL, the Cosmopolitan Soccer League, Eastern District. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. But
you'll hear about it if you are.
Yeah, I definitely will. Yeah, definitely. But it's I think it's just the passion, and of that, and I think it makes for a more interesting story to tell.
I think one of the first things that that got me interested in the Long Island League was I was looking through, like they were one of the earlier ones to adopt a good website, so that you can look up the teams and you can look up the rosters. And I was starting to cover the game locally for Soccer Long Island Magazine, which is local, magazine covering the game locally, and just doing it for fun. And on the LASFL website, the Port Jefferson team, my friend Craig manages the team, and one of the names that came up there at the time was Roland Gapene, who had been playing in MLS a bit. He played with Houston, he played with DC United, and I saw that he was playing, for Port Jefferson, or at least he was on the roster, and I was just, it struck me like, long story short was that, he basically was playing, he had the professional career had ended, and he was still fairly young, he wasn't even 30 yet. But he'd come back to the area, and, so the guys with the Port Jefferson team were his friends, his college teammates, basically, and he was playing with them whenever he could. And, just the idea of being able to, go up the road, 20 minutes away to a park and, watch a game and watch a guy who had played in MLS, to me struck me as like, wow, like that's pretty cool. Like, you can get really up close, and, there's no tickets, there's no, issue with parking, and so I connected with Gus and some of the other guys to the league, but like the first night I remember going out and meeting them, Gus had me come to the Christmas party because I had done a couple of articles, I guess, on the league. And, at first I was a little like, nervous, like, what am I getting into here? And who am I meeting? And, and it was like, all these characters from like all these different ethnic backgrounds and racial backgrounds and everything, just all different people from all different parts. And, but everybody just had like a feel of a big family, and of course we were out eating in an Italian restaurant in East Meadow, not the one you mentioned, another one. I can't remember off the top of my head, but of course the food was really good. And Gus was just like, here, eat, like throwing food at you, and it just, long story of a long-winded way of sort of taking what you were saying, Michael, about some of the more interesting stories then, that have come out of the league through the years now. Just it is interesting, to go and go see a game and you don't know who you're going to meet and what the background is. What a lot of the guys that are playing are college players, former college players. You do occasionally find a guy that played professionally, maybe not too often, but then we flipped it around, as I got more involved with the U23 tournament. And that's where I think we tried to have you come into the bigger game for the U23s. And, we have had quite a few interesting players along the way. And, I think you've covered the last few of them, right?
I think the last 2 or 3 of them I was hoping to do last year, but there were circumstances out of everyone's control. Unfortunately, there was no games, but again, it's a lot of fun. It's funny when you talk about different backgrounds and ethnic groups and whatnot. I think the one thing when I first started covering soccer, and I knew very little about soccer. Some people might claim I still don't know that much about soccer, but I like to think I've learned over the years. But one thing I said, wow, this is pretty cool. I could learn about all these different countries, ethnic groups, styles, that sort of thing, without traveling. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy traveling, but I thought that was pretty cool. And I think that's one of the things that again, makes it unique too, because everyone has their own culture, cuisine, style. I'm probably forgetting a few other things as well too. The under 23 tournament, I mean, that's a big age for players because they're just reaching their prime. And in an under 23 team, you could have 16-year-olds play, and and they can play in that tournament for many years. But at that juncture, one thing I've noticed that players hit their prime around 25, somewhere in the mid to late 20s. So again, a lot of these players are just hitting their prime, and you see some exceptional performances. And again, as a soccer fan and as a journalist, I want to be entertained at a game. I want to see a great goal, whether it's someone drilling a 40-yard shot, or someone dribbling through the opposition, or some great teamwork, 6-7 passes setting up a shot, or a goalkeeper standing on his or her head to make a save. And I've seen that at the under 23 tournament, the finals. You're talking about the finest teams and the finest players on Long Island, no doubt about it. And I know the teams have represented the Eastern New York well in further competitions down the line. You'll know more. You've forgotten more about that than I'll ever know.
Yeah.
But I think some of those teams have done quite well on the regional basis and nationally as well.
I think the last time they had no, it wasn't the last time. It was in 2012. The local club Real Carib won the national under 23, and then 2013, I think they lost in the final to Carolina Railhawks U23s. So they had a lot of one of the things that is not only would we get, and I think that's part of why I got so involved with the U23 tournament, is not only would we get the players from Long Island, so most of the guys that are from the area, from Long Island, from Queens, Brooklyn, that have gone on to play professionally over the last, at least 5 to 8 years that I've, been involved with the tournament, most of them have come through our tournament and, have been able to do that. But then you have, guys that, you have a lot of the Caribbean teams, the Hispanic teams, and particularly with the Jamaican teams, Caribbean teams, you were able to get a lot of guys that came in and played in those teams that you wouldn't necessarily associate with Long Island or New York, but just so many names that, like off the top of my head, one of the biggest ones I could think of would be Timothy Weah, playing and I actually saw him play a couple times with Rosedale Soccer Club. We were at I was at the regional tournament with Gus, and they brought him down there. And here's a guy that within a year would be with Paris Saint-Germain, and then represented the U.S. national team. You'd also have a guy like Kyle Duncan, who's playing with the Red Bulls, who played in the tournament. So many, MLS guys like Dylan Nealis played in the tournament. And I actually saw the game, so I know that they weren't just a name on a roster, like they actually played, and then, going back throughout the history, you had other guys, like a Tim Melia or Mike Grella, John Wolniak, that I'd heard about that played for, a Forest Park or a Glen Cove or whoever. So Gus's, one of his goals was to resurrect that history in the U23 and getting the best players we could get from basically from wherever and having them play in the tournament and, giving them a chance to play.
Would not be surprised if the likes of Chris Armas played for maybe West Babylon. It's funny, I could maybe check my own soccer.
Actually in a team, some sort of team. There's a picture of that.
When and there are probably some others that you didn't mention. Although you could almost like put together an all-star team of players who have played in the league or in the 23 level, maybe 2 all-star teams, best 11 on each, let's say. On whether all you have to do is play one game, boom, you're in the club, no problem. And I think that's remarkable. I think that's one thing maybe we don't realize, especially from amateur leagues, that where these players come from. I remember way back in the day, again, when I was the editor of Soccer Week, we'd hear of these, 17-year-old players playing with these amateur teams, playing with 25, 30-year-olds. And sometimes they were high school players that we heard about, and okay, up and coming. And some of them did well in college. Maybe some of them became pros, went into the USL, A-League, MLS, especially the ones that you had mentioned. and it's great to see that, they graduated, they went up the ladder the correct way, and as teenagers they were playing with men, and that I think showed, I think their development and their potential. And to me, if you could make it to the professional end of sports, and even if you don't have a long career, what you have to do to make it there. People think that, oh, you're playing games. No, it takes a lot more than that. And we won't have to go into it. You could probably do an entire podcast and a half with a professional player and what he or she has to go through, keeping themselves fit, eating well, not falling off the wagon. I don't mean that in a bad way, but not getting out of shape, because these days soccer seasons tend to last for 10 months, not just for a few months. But
we, we rely on Jake to tell us all about the fitness and the health. And
yeah, that's what I'm here for. But it's just to cut in again, it's such an interesting perspective hearing your guys' take on it, because as a player, like I got to play in the PDL, but I never, which is a similar thing. You have MLS guys who are older MLS guys or guys who will play in MLS in the future, but it's not as much of like a grassroots local soccer level as the Cosmopolitan League or the Long Island League. So what I wish as someone from the Hudson Valley is there was more of that. We had the Newburgh League, but we weren't really allowed to go there. We were in high school. It was what's it like? Everything the light. It's like in Lion King reference. It's like that's Scar's Kingdom or whatever. We weren't allowed to go and play in those leagues because they were very passionate inner city, and it just wasn't the same as like if we had a Cosmopolitan League in our area where when we were 17, we could test ourselves and really see former pros, and it would help our development. And I think it's a really good point that Michael, you are making in particular, that I think if we had more of those around the country, it would be great for the development of soccer, for sure. But one thing I have for both of you is the Cosmopolitan League. It's a family. You both, and the Long Island League is a family. And you guys have both mentioned that. And as a player, I have built-in families and friend groups with my teams. But how much did, Michael, you can go first. How much did that community mean to you as someone who didn't really play soccer growing up and just was learning the game, and you have all these friends and acquaintances that you meet?
It made it a lot easier to acclimate. And when you say family, most people, they accepted me immediately. Yes, I was a journalist at the time. I was working for Soccer Week. And we weren't doing investigative stuff. All we wanted to do is cover the beautiful game. To me, it's a learning experience. It was a learning experience, and it still is, by the way. The computer in the head is filled up with a lot of stuff, but there's always extra room for it. I'm trying to think of bad experiences that I had at games, and they don't come to mind. Maybe I've forgotten about them. But in terms of, again, people, I think people were happy about having their game covered, or writing a story about one of their players or a situation they're in. And again, it made it a lot easier. And today, with the proliferation of websites here, there, and everywhere, which is great, I think there's more coverage for all of soccer. But again, you break down barriers way back then, and we're talking, 1987? My Lord, it's more than 30 years ago now. I should give you a little background. I worked in Rochester for 10 years, and then I came back down to Long Island. But, I didn't know that many people in soccer here, but I met a lot of people in a short period of time, and I did feel comfortable. And if I did feel comfortable, I might not be covering it today, and I might not be on this podcast. So, I think, people were open to me, and probably other journalists as well, too. I wish I could say it was my good looks or great personality, but seriously, I think it was just about people being nice to people, period. And they understood, too, being a journalist. Wait a minute, we're nice to the journalist. He's not going to necessarily write a bad story about us. If you lose 5-1, well, I have to state the facts. But I think you know what I mean, though. I mean, you give them some slack. First of all, back then, if we were covering a game, the spoils would go to the victors. So we would write about the winning team more than anything else without dumping on the losing team. And by the way, I just thought of a great game that I covered many, many years ago. It was Forest Park, and it might have been Frosinone in one of the Eastern New York State Cups. And the whole game revolved around penalty kicks, taking them, missing them. The goalkeeper's making a save on the final shot of the game on a penalty kick. And it's one of those rare instances in my life, in a soccer writer's life, you could write about one particular subject. And I wrote the entire story for Soccer Week on penalty kicks in the game. And unfortunately, for all the hundreds of games I've covered since then, I have not had that opportunity to write about that again. But it was, I think Frosinone lost to Forest Park, I think 2-1 that day. I could probably find it in my collection somewhere there, but you just jogged my memory, by the way, just talking about an early game way back in the day.
Frosinone would have been in the Italian American League, soccer league, so the IASL, and then Forest Park, of course, is one of the Italian, the Long Island LASFL teams, but with a very, very, very heavy Italian influence from our good old friend Pasquale De Luca in Glen Cove, and actually was had a bit of time. They had Mike Grella playing there because the Grella family and the De Luca family and probably a couple other families would, I guess, know each other. Maybe there's some relations in common, but anyway, long story short, Mike ended up playing some games at some point for Forest Park. We don't exactly know when, but I'm sure Pasquale does.
Pasquale will probably, he knows everything about the history of the team. And and speaking of Glen Cove, Forest Park versus Glen Cove, you talk about some fantastic derby matches. I covered one way back in the day. I'm trying to remember what it was, and it's not coming up in my brain. But again, I'll probably have to cheat and look in the Soccer Week sometime to figure out what game that was.
You mentioned, Mike, that you've known Gus for so long. Can you maybe mention some of the early memories that you have of him? Because that would be going way back before I even got to know him.
Wow. Well, I think I talked about telling a joke, and like I said, I can't do that very well. Well, shorter jokes. I can't do the long range ones. I'd have to have a script in front of me. I guess the one thing, I felt like I was seeing him everywhere, no matter what event I was at. And when you see someone at that many events, you're thinking, who is this guy? And, I say hello and whatnot. And then we started talking. And again, what I mentioned before, that we had conversations, and I can't remember the conversations. All I know is that he listened to me. He wanted to know my opinion. And I think, as a leader, that's important to just hear what people are talking about. He doesn't have to agree. We probably had a couple of arguments here or there. And when I say arguments, disagreements, an argument sounds like you're yelling at each other, and we did. I don't think we ever did that.
You're one of the few that didn't get involved in yelling with us. Well, he's pretty legendary for that.
People will always say, watch what you say to Michael, he'll wind up in the newspaper, which is not necessarily the case. I like to say I'm old time journalism type of thing. I will never ever ambush anyone like that, particularly people that I know, which was, by the way, not easy to write Gus's obituary and several feature stories about him. It's tough enough writing obituaries, and I've written more than my share in the last year.
Yeah.
because of COVID and a generation of soccer players that I know who are passing or who are dying. But
Yeah.
when you know someone, it is so much more difficult because you're emotionally involved. And I know we were all emotionally involved in what transpired last April.
Yeah.
I remember, one time talking to Gus when I think was EJ was a goalkeeper at Stony Brook a
Right.
number of years ago, and Gus didn't like the fact that EJ wasn't getting the playing time uh, he deserved, and we talked about it after one of the games. I had covered Stony Brook way back in the day. Must have been what, 15 years ago or so, I guess.
Yeah.
But he was talking more of a father more than anything else, and I could understand that, But
Yeah.
had a lot of stuff, I guess, off the record. But the thing that I think I was most impressed with Gus was, again, he was a worker, and again, if he was the boss of something, he would do it, and whether because it had to be done or to set an example for everyone else. Hey, the boss is doing it.
Mm.
And I've worked with sports editors who have worked on the most menial tasks in the department when someone who had to go to dinner or someone was sick, and they would take over. And it's something I remember too. None of us should be too big not to handle any task that's thrown at us, particularly if you're the boss of an organization. And to me, that's what I think stands out among the things that stands out to me about Gus the most.
But I know one of the recent times that he probably would have been seeking you out and talk with you would have been about the I'm not sure if it was the last election for the USSF president when Cordero got in.
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember any of the conversations you had with Gus about that. He probably came to talk with you a couple times because Gus was as a USSF delegate. Gus was there for the election, so it was unlike anything we've seen before or since in American soccer, at least in recent times, and with Cordero getting in and just all of the controversy going on and the different people campaigning for votes and Gus being different people coming up to him and talking to him and maybe trying to influence him one way or another. But getting back to what you were mentioning with the jokes, one of the things Gus was really proud of with the jokes would be, he'd be going anywhere telling jokes. And he was at they're having one of the meals down there, and he had one joke that he was telling everybody, and I heard it about 20 times, but I remember he was telling Carl Martino the joke, and he got him to crack up, and he was like so proud of like getting all these people to go laugh, and and I remember even when because he was pretty close with Sunil Gulati, I mean, not like they were best friends or anything, but they knew each other pretty well. And I remember when he had I guess the heart attack and he was in the hospital a couple years before he passed, a couple years ago, and Sunil actually called him in the hospital, which meant a lot to him. It really made him feel like very proud that Sunil called him, and that his contributions and his work were recognized by the president of the USSF. So, but I know he would have been looking to talk to you about the election, just because it was like with all the local soccer stuff we'd be doing and everything would be related to like the league, and then all of a sudden it'd be like here comes Michael, who's a journalist covering the game at the highest of levels, and it's like somebody I can talk to about and get a different opinion.
Well, I spoke with several delegates, people from New York, because I was just interested to find out what they were thinking. Again, this wasn't on the record. This was all just talk. Sometimes it's good to find out good background information to understand why people are voting the way they are. Not quoting them, not putting anything in a story, but to understand that whole situation, I think we see that in bigger elections, presidential elections, senatorial elections too. Again, just to accrue information. And if my memory serves me correctly, because since I wasn't taping anyone, I wasn't writing down anything, but I think, Gus had his favorite candidates, but he also had, well, this one doesn't work out. Perhaps we will vote for this next one. You know what I mean? Let's say their number one candidate doesn't make it, or they drop out. Well, they've got to have plan B and C. And I can't remember who was plan B and C, but I think you always, it's not like, gee, our candidate is the greatest candidate ever. The rest are horrible. No, you do a pecking order. It's sort of like what I've done through the years with presidential elections. So many of my early candidates that I wanted usually don't wind up being the final candidate. You just you pick the next best one you think, and I think that we always, I think, again, if my memory serves me correctly, because that election seems like so many decades ago, and that was what, 2018, huh? Wow.
Yeah.
I think he had, he had, a number two person as well too, and I know that a lot of the states were voting in blocks at the time too, so they would have to get a consensus with Eastern New York, Sal Rapaglia, and let's face it, Gus was what, first vice president, second vice president? I could be
second, yeah.
okay. So obviously, you wanted to stay as a block, because that's where you're going to get your strength in voting. If you're going to have your delegates from your state vote all over the place, I think you're going to be potentially weaker in the long run, at least in USSF elections, which there's another one coming up later this month at their AGM, which will be interesting. On an aside there, interesting to see how they do that on Zoom. I don't think it'll be a problem though.
Right. Well, we've covered, Gus, quite a bit, as far as your memories and your recollections of them. And I just wanted to see if maybe you could give us a little bit on what you've been up to and what's going on with Front Row Soccer, and just a little recap. I know you've been, like all of us, living the pandemic life, and just how it's affected you.
Yeah, for I guess personally, on the personal side, trying to keep my sanity as much as possible. I miss going out to games, press conferences, practices, being around people. It's great to be solitary to a certain extent, but we're human beings. We like to be around people, and I miss all that. Yes, my wife and I live here and together. Miss seeing the children in Dallas, and also, well, even have another one that lives out in Mastic, but we try to keep our distance as much as possible. So, like I said, trying to keep sanity. Front Row Soccer is busy, even though maybe can't go to all the games I want to. Unfortunately, I've written, as I said, more than my share of obituaries that I want to do, but that's part of, if you're going to be a writer or a journalist, you've got to take the good with the bad, and that's the sad, I guess. I can't say bad, but saying that, one good thing about the pandemic, I had mentioned that first soccer team I had ever covered, the Rochester Lancers. For years, I've been trying to write a book about them, and I am in the final. I've literally finished writing the book, and now my wife and I are putting it through the editing process.
That's terrific.
So I am going to have hopefully a book later this year. It's the tentative title is Alive and Kicking, the incredible but true story of the Rochester Lancers. They lasted in the North American Soccer League for 14 years. Had some incredible adventures. You probably think I'm making them up, but no, it's all true. Trust me. Some interesting characters and people with character as well too. And just, you know, we don't go out to local restaurants, but we to eat, but we bring stuff in, whether it's delivered. You know, you don't want to see your favorite restaurant go out of business. So the best we can do, or anyone can do, is give them the business, and try to do that a couple times a week as well too. So, like I said, trying to keep my sanity, watching more than watching more soccer than I ever thought I would watch on TV. Sometimes triple headers in a day on the weekends. I've been writing things for U.S. soccer. A number of feature stories. Actually, I've had a lot of fun writing them. Some current players, some players way back in the day. And I appreciate the fact that they've given me the space to write sometimes 2,500 word stories. And when you're a writer, and it's like a player, as a player, and you're an attacking player, and you get all this extra room, hey, you could do a lot of things. And as a writer, when you get this extra room, you could literally tell a story slowly instead of jamming it in. And trust me, I've written 400 word stories on deadlines. There's an art to that, but there's also an art to this 2,000 word story that I call it maybe sculpting, you know what I mean?
Right.
Putting it together slowly but surely. But that's been a lot of fun too. So what I'm saying is I'm keeping busy.
Good.
It's not the way I anticipated it would be, but I just hope, just trying to stay away from COVID-19 as much as possible. And I just hope everyone out there who's listening and watching this does the same thing too.
Yeah. Wanted to, as we're wrapping up now, I just wanted to get your thoughts on one of the major stories in soccer this offseason. If you follow USL League One, it was the transfer of Jake Egan from Greenville Triumph to Forward Madison, which was creating a lot of controversy within USL League One. So just wanted to get your thoughts on that, and what you see for Forward Madison, if you've been able to keep up with it a little bit for 2021.
Well, I'm familiar with Greenville Triumph, right? John Harkes was, and I think still is, the coach, and I've known John from way back when. Forward Madison, actually, I have a good friend who lives in Madison, Wisconsin, Keith Furman, who's a business partner on Front Row Soccer, by the way. Small world there. And I have to admit, I don't know too much about Forward Madison, except that it was the brainchild of Peter Wilt, who is sort of like the Johnny Appleseed of professional soccer franchises, men's and women's, around the United States, starting, the team in Milwaukee. I don't know if it's I'm trying to remember their nickname. It's the Wave.
The Wave, right? Is the indoor team?
Right. There was another team I think Peter was with. Well, but also he was with the Minnesota team.
Indy 11.
In the USISL that played the Long Island Rough Riders for the championship in 1995. Was the general manager of the Chicago, I was almost going to say Sting, so that's a quarantine brain, Chicago Fire. I think helped create the Chicago Red Stars. Like I said, Forward Madison. I think he had something to do with the Indy 11 as well, too. I'm probably missing a few others, but I think Forward Madison had some interesting, if memory serves me correctly, had some interesting ways to promote the team in the past. So, and they were a competitive team as well too. That's the main thing. You know what I mean? It's not always about winning a championship. Nothing wrong about that, but at all. But if you're competitive and you're winning some of the time, you as a player, you could be saying, yes, you could be saying, damn, why aren't we making the playoffs? but if you could at least break even, I think you're doing fine. Anything more than that is a bonus.
Sounds like it's a ringing endorsement to me. But yes, Madison has been very well known for their different kind of social media and jersey, very unique, not different, very unique jerseys. They have this kind of all like different colors, purple, and I don't even know all the colors, but it's it's a cool setup. What is it?
A little bit of pink.
A little bit of pink. They got a good supporters group. In 2019, when we went there, it was a really good atmosphere. They sold it out. So I'm looking forward to it. So we'll see how it goes. It should be fun.
Are you going to be able to get leave some tickets for Michael's friend Keith? You know, if he's able to come to a game.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's allowed. We actually today in Madison last year they weren't allowed to play in their home county, so they had to go to Milwaukee actually to play home games in Wauwatosa, I think it was. And then this year, just today, the Dane County of Madison said you're allowed to play home games, but the players all need to wear masks while doing so.
Wow.
which I would be shocked if it holds that way. Whether between USL, between Forward Madison, between all these entities, I doubt they're going to make us go out there and play in masks, which would be absolutely banana land. But that's the situation we're in right now. So,
well, I don't know when the season begins, but hopefully within the next month or two, maybe things will get better that you won't have to wear masks. You know, the one thing that I've learned about the pandemic is, yes, we all make plans, but things have been so fluid. Things change so much. So hopefully for you guys, you don't have to. But if you do have to wear masks, I definitely want to get back to you to do a story about that. An interesting story. I hope you don't have to, though. But
I will absolutely do that story, and I will be not very nice to the rules and regulations. I will be brutally honest if we are forced to do that. I am not. I think that's ridiculous. But we won't get into that. The point of this episode was you and Gus, and so thank you so much for joining us. It was really cool for me. I'm kind of a little bit of a soccer historian, and I love seeing the grassroots level, like the stories no one hears about. So I've loved kind of catching up and sitting back and listening to you and Dave chat, because you guys have really gone back and forth very well, I thought.
Well, again, gentlemen, Jim, Dave, thank you very much for having me on. It was great. I know we could probably talk forever, but I'd probably get yelled at from the boss upstairs. But any time, my pleasure to take time out and talk. And especially someone like Gus, who meant so much to the game. Like I said before, left us way too early. Great guy, great man, great soccer person, great family man. Not necessarily in all that order, but I think you know what I mean. And I think we all miss him in our own unique ways. And I just hope his family. Well, I'll leave it at that. I'm lost for words right now.
That's a rarity. You're known for being able to come up with words, and I actually get a lot of our titles for our show. I try to get it's a little thing Jake and I have where I try to get a little creative with the title, and I actually definitely get inspired by the titles you come up with for your articles. So that's a little bit of the Michael Lewis influence that I've had. It's been on me with our podcast.
I try to have some fun with some of them. I try not to make fun of anyone's name too much. No. And if I don't think of something in the first 10, 15 seconds, it's a pretty basic headline. You know what I mean? If someone resigns, I go back 4 more or whatever. Yeah. If someone, I remember John Wolniak, you were speaking of the fact John Wolniak scored an important goal for the Red Bulls. Maybe it was the Metro Stars, whatever. The team that played in New Jersey. A number of years ago, he scored a big goal in overtime, and I called it Johnny on the spot. And then boom, Wolniak scores a game-winning goal for Metro Stars, Red Bulls, whatever. So, you could have fun with the name, maybe using a cliche or, it's fun. It's something that I got from the New York Daily News. I had written for them for 22 years, and
Yep.
even Newsday does it too.
Uh,
You want to attract people to your story. Sometimes people say it's a little corny, but it is what it is.
it's all in good fun. But thank you so much for joining us and taking the time out to share a bit about Gus and some of your stories as well. And you know, anytime we can have Michael Lewis on, it's always going to be a good episode. And as I mentioned, definitely defines aristocrat in soccer, American soccer for sure, and soccer beyond. But we always try to get the elite guests or the best guests that we can get. So, but thank you very much. And Jake, I guess it's time for us to say,
Did it?
good night.
Yes, it is. Until next time, everyone. I'm the athlete,
I'm the advocate.
and we
We are
are
the aristocrats.
aristocrats.